Recently, I was sent an email with some questions from someone who'd watched the documentary on YouTube. And these are really good questions. In fact, I've only sent him an answer to the first set of questions, although I'm working on the others. And I thought, well, I'm making some videos today. I'd go over the questions. And do submit your questions. One of my rules on this, I will not use your name on anything public on the website. Okay, unless I specifically ask for your permission and receive it. Okay, because I don't think that I should use people's names unless there's a very good reason to. Then an exception I will make is if someone publishes something publicly about me on the internet, YouTube video, website, whatever. I believe that is giving tacit permission, but in private communication it should be private. So with that in mind, I will answer questions, and if I get a good question from you in an email, you might find me doing a YouTube video on it. I won't use your name, because that's not right. Okay, I'm going to cover in this video his first set of questions. And he says, my first set of questions relates to your election. I understand the idea that when the College of Cardinals apostatizes, laymen and women have the right to elect a valid pope. However, what confuses me is what determines who are the actual electors. Does everyone who rejected the Novus Ordo in the same way you did have the right to be an elector? That's a very good question. And then he has some more that follow on. So I'm going to take this question at a time. Does everyone who rejects the Novus Ordo in the same way you did have the right to be an elector? All who reject the Novus Ordo, Vatican II, and the heretical usurpers in the papacy have an equal right to vote, provided they profess the divine and Catholic faith whole and entire. Basically, we form the Catholic Church. In a separate video, I went into more detail on this, how the canonists say when the ordinary electors fail, the universal church has a right to elect the Pope. Now, true, I could go into great detail on the various canonical opinions and stuff, but in a situation like this, we were reduced down to the universal church electing a pope. Okay, and yes, all who rejected the apostasy have a equal right to vote. Okay, as part of the universal church, we're Catholics. And the way I like to look at it, according to Pope Boniface VIII, all Catholics have a duty to obey the Roman Pontiff. Therefore, I conclude from that we have a right as Catholics to have a living, breathing Pope to obey. We have a question. We can go, Holy Father, this is my question. We can go to the Pope, get an answer, a definitive answer, one that comes from Jesus Christ through his vicar. Okay, so that's where we're at there. We'll move on. At the time of your election, how could you have been certain whether your small group were representative of the faithful? For example, what if on the other side of the world a group of 10 like-minded people had elected their own pope? Would they have taken precedence because they consisted of the majority of the church? Now, I recall this question was asked of me in 1992, almost in the same wording. Okay, exact same type of question. What if two groups on opposite sides of the earth in 1990 had elected a pope? Now, in this time of instant communication through email, websites, all this stuff, I mean, I can find out what's going on. Russia, China, lots of places throughout the world, okay? It gets talked about. I mean, it gets all over the world, but go back 22 years, okay, to the early 1990 when we were actually in the final efforts of putting together the papal election. Okay, today I've got email, I've got DSL internet. Okay, I can ship stuff out. I can ship out big documents. I can ship this video out. Okay, well, I'm uploading another one right at the moment. It's still taking time to upload because videos are big, but I can ship out big files, lots of information. I can ship it around the world. I can put it on YouTube, okay? And then anyone can go see it, all right? We go back 22 years to 1990. I had mail. I hadn't heard of email, okay? You know, I had an old Apple II Plus computer and a printer, okay? An old dot matrix printer, okay? And I was, high cotton with that. That was fast, I could type up, my computer would actually hold 2 pages in memory at once before it hit the save button. Then you have to wait till it saves so you could scroll on down. Trying to scroll through a document was a pain, okay? True, there were newer computers at the time. I didn't really need one quite yet. I did get a new one later on. Now, I was at the cutting edge. How many people were still using that old-fashioned thing called a pen? Okay, pen and paper. Put it in an envelope. Address it. Slap on a stamp. Mail it. Wait 2 weeks for it to get to Europe. That was communication. I mean, we didn't make international phone calls. I remember making one prior to the election to encourage someone to come to the election, because I considered that important. It was, expensive. Okay, you didn't do these things. You didn't have this instant communication. So the possibility of 2 groups forming on different parts of the world was indeed something that to be considered. So, I mean, this is a very good question. Okay, and this is the answer I gave in 92. If 2 groups had proceeded in good faith to elect a pope, ignorant of the other group, they would then unite when they became aware of each other. Why? Because we are the church. I propose that both claimants would resign in favor of a new election of the combined groups. Now, it could also happen the principle of first in time, first in right would be observed. So the first elected in time would be truly the Pope. Okay? And when they became aware of each other, the 2 claimants could choose this method, with the true Pope validating the actions of the other claimant posited in good faith. I mean, there'd be a principle, Canon 209, which he would have a colored title. His people believed he's Pope. They had a good faith, okay? So the 2 groups would unite because we are the church. We are a single church. And the fact that 2 different parts of us were separated, okay, and did not become aware of each other's action. When we became aware of it, say, oh, good, let's get together. Let's work together for the good of the church, because we are the church. Okay, we've got 2 claimants of the papacy. All right, I am Pope. As with all Catholics, what am I supposed to be ready to do? I'm supposed to be ready to lay down my life for the church. And if that requires me to lay down the papacy, that would apply as well. And then he asks, and what steps did you take to at least try to gather as many true Catholics as you could? I'm sure I've answered this before, but I think I should answer it again. The effort to elect a pope was discussed worldwide from the middle of the 1970s until the completion of the election in 1990. Okay? So this was not a new idea in the late 1980s. Okay? It had been going on. Father Sainz Arriaga, whose stuff was published in Mexico. He was a Mexican. In Spanish. One of his books was translated. Unfortunately, Sede Vacante, I have not found in translation. He actually went to Europe, to Rome, to talk to cardinals appointed by Pope Pius XII. We've got to do something. Try to convince them of the problem. Get them to elect a pope. Okay, work was being done, as discussed throughout. Okay, it's a matter the took bishops discussed it in 1981, 1982, 1983. They didn't do anything. So this was not an idea that just came to the fore in the late 1980s. From the moment I personally became convinced of this necessity in 1987, I personally contacted all the people on my mailing list worldwide in order to promote an election. About that same time, several others also became convinced, independently of me, of this necessity, and they were doing the same thing. Okay, they were contacting people. In fact, right after I become convinced, I think I may still be in the process of writing a letter to my friends. I wrote a general letter because it was simpler to go zzz, 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 10 times. You just change dear so and so, so okay, just change that, new envelope, and send it to everybody. I was still in that process, I believe, when I get a letter out of the blue from someone I never heard of, but he had gotten hold of my name. He was contacting people. So I contacted him right straight back and said, I'm with you. I'm doing it. So we were contacting worldwide. Heidi Hagen in Geneva, Elizabeth Gerstner up in like Netherlands or somewhere were two people. We had contacts, Carlos de Sandro in Argentina. I don't recall any contacts, personal contacts in Australia at the moment. Hutton Gibson, who was still in Australia at the time he became aware of it. Okay, he wrote against it. I mean, the word was getting out worldwide in the late 1980s. Now, when we wrote Will the Catholic Church Survive the 20th Century in 1989 and published it in early 1990, we sent it to every Sedevacantist chapel in the world to notify them of the upcoming papal election. And we had a list to work from. I don't know if it's even on the internet. Radko K. Jansky. You might look this up. See, he published a Traditionalist Catholic Directory, I think from about 1970 till around 1989 is the last one I have, and I think it's the last one came out. So I think he died in 1990. He listed, he had a little symbol for every Sedevacantist chapel. We sent one to every Sedevacantist chapel in the world. This included all of the Took bishops, many of the future Took bishops, okay? So we got the information out as best as we could all over the world. We sent into South Africa. I recall that to, was that Bedingfeld down there? We got contact with Sibumo Mukuni in Japan. I think I forget how we got in contact with them, but they were notified. Another Took bishop in Japan. I forget his name. Of course, all the ones in the United States, France, Germany, all over Europe, everywhere we could get it. We made every effort to contact every Catholic in the world. And that's those who would reject Novus Ordo as we defined above. And so we made an effort to minimize the possibility of a separate group even forming. Doesn't it seem somewhat appalling that such a small group of people in rural America could make such a decision? That's another question he asked. And it was appalling to me how little people really cared for it. Now, I remember I was talking to people from 87 up to 90. I met with some personally, including a man from France when he came to visit relatives in Iowa. I met with him, a man over in Missouri. Okay, we had a lot of people showing interest in a papal election. They even said, we're coming. One woman even did come from the Netherlands, only to leave when she saw that it was not a larger group. It reminded me of the gospel, when the king held a marriage feast and summoned the people to come. That's when they started making excuses. Why we shouldn't have an election now, but should wait. Heck, we've been waiting 3 decades, 30 years. You want to wait 40? You want to wait 50? Some of these people are still waiting. Most of these same people never did anything after the election to supply for what they thought we should wait for. Okay, they just let it. I mean, some of them even still talked about electing a pope. It's like, folks, we did this. They never did anything. There is an exception, Ken Mock. And if anyone can find Ken Mock, I'd like to talk to him again. Because I talked to him on, I talked to him on the phone several times prior to the election in 1990. And on July 15th, 1990, he came with a Patrick Henry out of Arizona. This should get out there. They said we should wait. I said, what for? Well, he said, we need a priest to absolve us from the excommunications we've incurred for participating in Novus Ordo with the traditionalists. I said, okay, great. You know where a priest is. Let's go get on the phone and call him up and get him over here. No. What he didn't mention is we had a priest right there, although illegitimately ordained, Patrick Henry, who had been ordained by Schukert. But he didn't consider him qualified, nor did I. So neither one of us turned to Patrick and says, do this for us. Okay. I said, okay, you can't tell me where a priest is. You have no idea where to start looking for one, do you? No. So I said, we went through it in the book. We professed our faith. We renounced any appearance of heresy. We can proceed. He left that evening saying he'd sleep on it, see whether he'd come or not. The next day he informed me, I'm not coming. But we made every effort to contact people. All right? They all made excuses. 6 of us came together. We held the election anyway. Because canon law is quite clear. Those that assemble get to elect no matter how few of the college that elects they are. And I'd like to go into one last question in this first set of questions. Would you ever consider resigning from the papacy if it became apparent that the majority of true Catholics wanted to elect a new pope for the sake of reconciliation, as happened to end the Avignon exile? Actually, this was proposed by Gordon Bateman, who you may not remember. Gordon Bateman participated in the election of Father Earl Lucian Pulvermacher as Pope Pius XIII in 1998. And there's something to show how much we got the information out. Gordon Bateman, I was reviewing the list of people who received Will the Catholic Church Survive the 20th Century? He was on that list. Okay, he received the information about the 1990 election. So he was part of the election, elected Pulvermacher as Pius XIII. He was then appointed as cardinal by Pius XIII. That's when he ran across the problems with Pius XIII and the pendulum. I won't go into all that here. He did not do like most people and just go sit in the corner. No. He got after it. He says, we still need a pope. He sent out a call to all the claimants of the papacy, which at that time was myself and Victor von Pence as Linus II, all the Sedivacantes, priests and bishops, at the end of 2001. He sent out 2 letters asking us, in all humility, to set aside all differences and to do exactly what's asked for here. Gather together and in the vacancy in a manner that is certain. I was one of the very few that cooperated in any manner with the effort. I cooperated for a great deal. Gordon Bateman, I believe, has died. And the effort eventually just simply ceased. At one time, the few who were pursuing it did say, well, looking at things, Pope Michael was Pope, but then they receded from that because there's been a lot of seed that's not fallen on good ground in these times. People have not persevered in spite of all the contradictions against us. And so I do pray for them. So I wrote in response to this, I was recommended in 2005 that I write saying, I'm removing my offer on this case. Okay, you haven't been able to get anything together. I'm holding firm. And I will hold firm to my claim because I think that is what is best for the church. And so I believe I have that letter on the internet. If not, contact me. I'll get you a copy and I'll make sure it gets published to the internet. So, yes, I did consider it. It didn't go anywhere. I consider for the good of the church I must stand firm on my claim to the papacy because I am the Pope. We did everything we should. We held a papal election. And although there is a possibility of 2 separate groups forming, has that materialized? No. What do we have in the way of claims to the papacy? I'll cover this for a minute because it is on Wikipedia. there are three classes of claims to the papacy, and we can dismiss two of them. The first are what I call internet fictions. They don't really exist, okay? Or they're such a wild claim that, I mean, there's no effort to do anything for the church. They just say, I'm Pope. We can throw them out. Then there are what we call the mysticalists. You know, Clemente, Gaston Tremblay, Michael Collin, two Gregories the 17th and a Clement the 15th or whatever. There are others. They've had visions. I'm making them Pope. Popes are elected. Look at history. Popes are elected. So we can dismiss the mysticalists. That leaves us with 4 elections. And there's a principle, first in time, first in right, I mentioned. July 16, 1990, I was elected. 1994, a group which consisted in part of Ken Mock, although he pulled out shortly before the election, Father, then Bishop Fooey, who knew of my election because he wrote to me afterwards concerning it. Let's see, a Bishop Gaston Lopez, or Lopez Gaston, who was a priest at the time of my election, who almost came to the election where I was elected. Okay, so he knew about it. All right, and a bunch of others elected Victor Von Pence in 1994. They knew of my election. They never contacted me. I didn't find out about that until 1998, when someone read to me something Ken Mock had written on the internet, which was promoting Fulvermacher's election, and said, "Is it true that you resigned in favor of Linus II?" And I looked at these people and I said, "Linus who?" I had never heard of Linus II. I had heard a rumor that some of the Took bishops had elected a pope. That's all I had heard, and I could find nothing out about it. You gotta remember, this was before I got on the internet and before the age of instant communication. I'd ask people who, I mean, it just was rumor. Couldn't be tracked down. So, that was 1998. Then, of course, we have 1998 with the election of Pius XIII. Now, Father Pulvermacher, he had 10 copies of the book that called for my election. Ken Mock participated in that, pulling out shortly beforehand. Gordon Bateman knew of the election. I'm trying to think. I don't know for certain that any of the others that participated did. I'm sure they probably had. Knew of my election. They proceeded. They didn't bother contacting me. The only other election occurred down in South America, and I think it's a series of 3 elections, but that one is a dead issue because the third one in that line has resigned, leaving a vacancy. I've tried to contact these people and got nowhere. I mean, I've tried to contact Victor Von Pence. In fact, I sent him a letter the other day after my ordination and consecration. No answer. I did not bother trying to contact Father Pulvermacher because I considered his stand on several issues to be heretical. I need to waste my time with heretics. But we have 4 elections. Father Pulvermacher is now dead. So his line, there's been no successor. The group in South America, the third one in that line, is election, death, third one, resigned, leaving no successor, so that line is dead. Linus II, I would say, is virtually resigned. He's not functioning in any manner that I can find out about as Pope. He's gone back to being Victor Von Pence, and I hear he's a bank guard in England. And that leaves me right here as the sole elected claimant to the papacy. Because I'm sure we can disregard the heretical claimants in Rome, which is now Benedict XVI, and will soon be succeeded probably by John Paul III. Okay, we can ignore them because they're no more Catholic than the Muslim down the street. So I hope this has answered your questions.